People of Dixon, you have shocked the world. I'm just gonna make this video quickly, hopefully. Knowing me, it probably won't be. Reviewing my prediction for the election now that it has happened. It's over. Not really. They're still counting in some seats. Just because, how amazing is that result? Not even the most rusted on Labour hacks were expecting that. I think there's one thing we can all say. We were not expecting that. I mean, I thought it'd be an increased majority by like a few seats, maybe. Not, the landslide we saw. I mean, they're on higher numbers than Kevin Rudd. Yeah, and it's got to be said. How good is Queensland? I mean, they turned out for Albo as much as they did for Rudd. I never thought I'd see that again on the federal level in Queensland. Just picking up all of the seats that they did. Or at least not until Jim Chalmers came in, maybe. I mean, look at this. They're probably in position to, when all is said and done, have a majority government with over 90 seats. I mean, that's unreal. Especially considering, the polling was actually off this election. It's sort of reversed 2019. I was expecting it to be off maybe a point or two, just favouring Labour, and that it was actually going to get really close. And I was actually seeing a lot of people that had previously predicted Labour majorities go back to saying, nah, probably a Labour minority. Man, that was not the case at all. The polls were off this time by like 3-4 points in favour of the coalition. And the craziest part about it to me is that I just had no sense that that was even happening. Maybe it's because I was just sort of trying to not get my hopes up, Still got that PTSD from 2019 and all that, but I really didn't think it would be that much of a blowout, even with all that's happened, even with how terrible of a campaign, which I think I can say that objectively now, it's not just my bias speaking, even with how terrible of a campaign Peter Dutton and the coalition ran, I thought, there's no way. I mean, these are Bob Hawke numbers right here. I think it's, maybe when it's all said and done, I actually don't remember, because I think they increased the size of the House, but Bob Hawke in 87... was sort of the largest Labour Party landslide, and then you've got this result here. I really couldn't believe it. Now, I've just got my previous prediction up. Obviously, I think I did all right, because, I was actually predicting an increased majority, and I think a lot of people are kind of weary of saying that, and I understand it's never happened. It hasn't happened since Federation. In Australian history, there's never been a incumbent government that's increased their majority at their first re-election. Labor's just bucked the trend. It's unreal. If we just look at what I put down, I had them on 79 seats. Now, if I was really just letting my biases fly, if I was really libbing out, which I actually don't think applies much as a phrase to Australia, I could have had Labor picking up Dixon. I could have had him winning Leichhardt. They would have won Patterson. Maybe I could have had him picking up Deakin. Look, that's about it. Maybe Bass. That's 84 seats. That's about their ceiling. That's what I was expecting. I thought, it's going to be a really narrow election, but it's just one of those things where they've got sort of a buffer now, and it's not so much about the national vote as it is in these marginal seats. And actually, just thinking back to some of the reports that Redbridge put out, it was spot on. Look, they got the national TPP off, as everyone did, but what they were saying, which is that we are seeing Labour up by 4 points in marginal seats, bang on, because they won every damn marginal seat. They won safe Liberal seats, and we'll get into that later. I just wanted to look at this YouGov because it came out sort of the morning after I recorded the video, my last video. And, I mean, what a shocker this poll was. Oh yeah, also, I figured Labour could probably win Gilmore. I just assumed that they were too stubborn, but no, not at all. Anyway, this YouGov MRP came out, the final one of the campaign, that had Labour at 84 seats. And I remember seeing this and thinking, that's insane, but there's no way it happens. Well, it turns out this has been the most accurate poll of the entire election season. And they actually underestimated Labour in this poll as well. It's kind of hard to wrap my head around, just because I don't think anyone could have gauged that the national environment was actually pointing to, let's just get the numbers up here. I think they're on 55 to 45, which makes Roy Morgan the most accurate pollster out of the entire campaign. That absolute outlier of a poll they posted a few weeks ago was actually bang on. And I never doubted them personally. I knew better than to doubt my mate Roy. What a turnaround. And I do actually remember, I think, as you can tell, this is going to be a very scatterbrained video because, there's not as formatted as the last one. And there's not going to be any editing or anything like that. And thanks, by the way, for the engagement on the previous video. I really wasn't expecting that. I think I posted it and then I checked it like 15 hours later and it had 8 views. And I was like, nice. It's pretty good. It's better than usual. So, yeah. Thanks for that. Forgotten what I was saying, but yeah. Roy Morgan with their outlier polls, which I just thought was like, that's what they usually do. They usually have, you saw it with The Voice, they put out, I think it was still 56-44 to no, but it was way better than any other poll they had been putting out. And they were doing the same thing with this election, even when the Libs were still kind of up, or when it sort of ticked over to 51-49 to Labour, they brought out that 55-45 poll, and that was before the election was even called. I think that was in April. Well, may have been right after it was called, I don't exactly remember. And I remember, obviously everyone dismissed it, including me. As nice, as cool, listen, it did feel good to see a poll just coming up every Monday with these outrageous results for the party, but I didn't think anything close to what they were saying was actually going to happen. Now, I remember, I think it was One on Survivor on Twitter, they were saying that they're concerned, this might have not been them, I might just be misattributing this, but I think they were saying they're concerned that there has been a bit of herding going on within the polls. And I think they were right, but not the way that I was expecting. I was thinking, yeah, herding, that's obviously just that they're trying to sort of make it, and I was just assuming they were getting results that were good for the coalition, but everyone else was sort of posting 52-48 to Labour. That's why we saw so many 52 to 48, because I do think it was just herding. And I assumed, okay, well, that's just going to benefit the coalition then. No, quite the opposite. It actually meant that they were underestimating Labour hugely. I actually can't remember the last time that a national TPP was this drastic. Even look, Kevin Rudd landslide in 2007. I think he was on 52.7. In Bob Hawke 87, I think it was like 53 something. We're getting into unprecedented territories to the point where, look, now that I say it, it probably won't be true, but they've got so much of a buffer now. I really do think they're looking at over 90 seats when all is said and done. The coalition is going to have to pick up 30 seats to gain majority government again. I think they're just in again, regardless, in 2028. And I think that means, and it's amazing how, man, this is really getting into just the random tangents. I'm not even finishing my previous thoughts, but I guess that's what you get. It's amazing how everyone, even the voters, were assuming it was going to be rather close. You had your drips on Twitter and that, but look, they're not exactly grounded in reality. Yeah, everyone thought it'd be close, and then it just wasn't. I don't know how this didn't show up in polling. I guess, it's just a flaw of the polling industry. And you're going to have things like herding. Obviously in America they had herding, and I actually thought that that would favour the Democrats in America. I was thinking that Kamala Harris was going to win that election, and the polls would be wrong as they had been the previous 2 times in America. Now it turns out herding's A-OK in America, and they got it pretty right, although, look, in America the polling was saying a lot of 47-49, and it's not really giving it that much of an outright answer as to who was going to win. But anyway, that's beside the point. Yeah, look, it's unprecedented territories for polling here, and obviously, I guess a preferential voting system is going to produce much. The results are going to be much different to a first past the post system. I wonder if they've got the primary vote here somewhere. Maybe we just go on live results. It's just got the seat amounts, party totals maybe. Here we are. I mean, look at that. People were saying this was going to happen, and I was kind of believing it as well, but I didn't actually think it would happen. Labour overtaking the Liberals on the primary vote. They're nearly at 35%, and I know there was a lot of this discourse, and I still heard it on the ABC. You know, the major parties only amounted to 66% of all the vote. Yeah, that's what happens with a preferential voting system. If we had first past the post, both Labour and the Coalition's primary vote, well, I guess there wouldn't be a primary vote, just would be the vote, would be way up. But you have the option to preference others first. That's just what you're going to see happen. But I never understood this whole thing of, wow, both the majors' primaries are really down. Yeah, they were kind of down in 2022. Labour on 32 was a low for them. But in general, if you look back at elections that have already happened, Labour always sort of hovers around these mid-30 mark. The Coalition usually hovers around the 40-41 mark. So this is actually a drastic result. This is lower than what Labour achieved last time in the primary. It's a huge swing. Not a huge swing, a 2% swing, but when you look at the marginal seats, there's been a huge swing towards them. Now, man, I'm really getting off track here. It's extremely late. I think what I'll just do is I'll just go onto my prediction, and we'll just look at what I got right and what I got wrong, because I think it's probably important. It's a sort of a learning thing, I imagine. Let me just correct some of these ones that I changed. I think that's right there. Now, I'll start off with WA. I don't think I messed up too much here. Obviously, Labour ended up winning more. We've got the actual results here, by the way, which I'll have a look at later. But Labour ended up picking up more. I very confidently said it wasn't a target for them. I was wrong. And Bullwinkle's actually proving to be quite a close race. Got the seats in doubt down here. We've got Bullwinkle here. Labour is ahead. Yeah, 85 votes. I actually think the Nationals running here really did spice up the race and made the preferences tricky to work out. I actually don't know the relationship between the WA Nats and the Liberal Party, obviously the Federal Liberal Party, because I would have just thought, depending on whoever gets into the two, their preferences will just back each other, and you'll just end up with this very close Labour victory regardless. But apparently that isn't the case, because obviously they're not. The WA Nats are separate from the Federal National brand, and then, as I said, slightly different ideologies as well. I don't really know what's going to happen here, just because I don't know how the WA National preferences really distribute. There's obviously Labour can bank on the Greens and legalise cannabis, but that's not really going to get them over the line as much as, your One Nations would. We'll have to see. I think it's going to be a really close race. I actually wasn't expecting it to be that close, just because, WA is pretty strong for Labour. And honestly, we just look at some of the seats in WA. I know Tangney was the most marginal going into this election, and I know Peter Dutton was there on the Friday before the election with his sort of weird press conference, and that's another thing that I wanted to say about Peter Dutton. I don't know what the Liberal Party's internals were looking like for most of this, but obviously I don't think they were good signs for the party. So, look, I have to commend Dutton for managing to run that campaign without really cracking much. Obviously he kind of did, he obviously wasn't providing alternatives to the Australian voting public. But if his internals were pointing to a defeat like this, then, man, yeah, it'd be hard to do. And I actually think that his concession speech was extremely gracious. kind of wonder where that bloke was throughout the campaign. If we saw more of that side of him, I think he would have done a lot better. He obviously had some nice comments to say about Ailey France and also Albo as well. I maybe this look. If it was me, there'd just be a huge weight off my chest because really he was just hung out to dry by his front bench colleagues. They did nothing to help the Liberal Party brand, and that's what you've seen. They got smashed. Anyway, Sam Lim, this is like hardly a marginal seat. It still is a marginal seat, but barely. There was a big swing to Labor here. I want to look at a seat like Swan as well. Yeah, you can see this isn't even a marginal seat anymore at this point. 14-point margin. These are safe seats here in Perth. So yeah, I think I did all right with Perth. The exact thing I said that would happen in the Northern Territory did end up happening, which was that the margin up here in Solomon for Luke Gosling would come down to around 3-4 points. I just want to see what the number is on currently. I've sort of been tracking this intermittently throughout the day. Actually, that's gone down quite a bit there. Down to 2 points. Huh. We'll have to see. I don't know. Look, Phil Scott. I've seen like 2 clips of him singing his Kumbaya songs with his staffers and that. So I don't really know whose preferences will go to. Well, probably the Country Liberal Party. Let me just turn off my phone. Sorry about that. And let me turn off my notifications on Discord as well. It's very unprofessional. The Greens went backwards actually in Solomon after their performance there at the Northern Territory election, which was interesting to see. Look, I think Labor will probably squeak by, but yeah, that's a pretty decreased margin there. Now, Lingiari was exactly what I said would happen, and that was there'd be a swing towards the Labor Party. So I was spot on with that. Pretty happy about that. South Australia, yeah, look, obviously they picked up Sturt, and if I'm not mistaken, I think it was like 7 points or something. 6.8, yeah. So that's a big swing towards Labor there. Look, I think everyone was sort of predicting that by the end. I don't think that was much of a shock, but if you take a seat like Boothby, which I think was either 2 or 3 points at the last election, and now you're seeing it at an 11-point margin. I mean, look, what did you expect running Nicole Flint? Look, I mean, it's a bad decision. Getting on to Melbourne and Victoria as a whole here, let's just go over to the actual map. Wow. Look, I was sort of saying that this whole idea of there being a swing against Labor in the western suburbs, not only would it not matter as much because those seats aren't as marginal, but also I find that it would probably be quite decreased by now and maybe even might not even exist. I know that's what Redbridge polling seemed to suggest. That was spot on. I mean, I really can't believe the result. I was really nervy about my prediction for McEwen. I thought, man, it's probably gone. It just seems really unrealistic that they'd pick the seat back up. No, not pick it up, but hold the seat. And as we've seen, no, there was actually a swing towards the Labor Party. Take a seat like Hawke, which the Liberals were targeting quite heavily. I don't know what they saw there, but there was no swing at all. Retained by Labor. You take a seat like Gorton that I was actually worried about because, you know, no real reason. It wasn't based in reality. There was no swing at all. It swung slightly towards the Labor Party, even on the primary. So yeah, the swing just didn't exist. And on top of that, yeah, Labor picked up seats. The most amazing thing, obviously, they picked up Deakin, and how great was that to see? And the Menzies is sort of in doubt. Not really sure what's going to happen there, but Labor's been in the lead. They have a decent amount in. It's going to be interesting on how preferences flow because there is sort of just, you know, a lot of those bottom of the barrel minor right wing parties. We're going to have to see. But the most astounding result was actually Aston. Now, even if the Liberals didn't pick up a single seat in Victoria, which is what I actually ended up predicting, I had them picking up Aston. Or obviously a pickup from the by-election at least. Swung by 6 points to Labour. That is 6 points is off of the previous results in 2022. It did swing about 0.4% to Labour off of the by-election. Yeah, they smashed it. They romped it in Victoria. They romped it in everywhere. I mean, look, their vote increased in every single state except for WA, in which it only went backwards point something percent. I don't actually remember now. They smashed it. It was quite shocking. I was actually speaking to my grandmother, who is just lifelong Liberal voter, always will be. But I remember her saying, "Look, they might call it rather fast. It could end up being a landslide." And I remember saying to her, "Nah, there's no way it'll be a landslide. I think it'll actually be really close." She was right. She got it bang on. She obviously is much more in touch with the Australian public than I am, even as someone who doesn't like Labor. Maybe I should just get her to do these videos. I don't really know what the point of what I'm saying is there. Moving on to... Oh, yeah, we got to speak about Tasmania. I don't know why Tasmania randomly just locked in this cycle. I can't understand it. I'm particularly shocked about Bridget Archer, really. Mate, look, obviously I'm not from Bass. I don't live in Launceston. So I just assumed that she was popular because people were telling me she was popular. That's kind of the thing with sort of an unperfect... I think Greens did not win Gippsland. An unperfect science, like, I don't know, election predictions. It's not a science at all, really, but it's hard to know what's actually going on the ground. You can listen to pundits and you can look at polling data, but it's what happens on the day, or in this case, what happens in the weeks leading up to the day that really define the result. This is a 10-point swing to Labour in Bridget Archer's seat. The moderate faction of the Liberal Party is dead. It is gone. I'm probably not going to mention it, but Julian Leese's seat in Barawa, he nearly lost. Labor nearly picked up Barawa. If Labor is nearly picking up the Sydney Hills, then that's how you know you've got a landslide on your hands here. There was a massive swing against Bridget Archer in Bass. A massive swing as well in Braddon. And obviously Rebecca White really romped it in Lyons, which I was saying that, look, that's what's going to happen. Let's just see here. Yeah, massive. There was about a 10-point swing across Tasmania. And obviously I got Lyons right, but I wasn't expecting these two to go to Labor. Now, we'll go to Queensland. My God, Queensland. I actually remember watching some of the early results come in around 7 PM and just thinking, this looks really good. I think we'll be fucked by the pre-poll, though. I really was thinking that. Mostly because Anthony Green was telling me that. Well, not Anthony Green. Everyone on the panel was basically saying that. That really hasn't happened. And obviously there were signs that pre-poll wouldn't be as bad for Labor as it typically is. It typically has been previously, and that's because half the country voted in pre-poll, and they were leading the polls throughout the entire early voting period. There was a huge swing in Leichhardt, and I was saying that it's really hard to get a grasp on Leichhardt because it's just, I don't know, it is kind of remote, but I wasn't expecting a 10-point swing. I think I ended up saying that it would be under 1%, but the Liberals would hold on. That didn't happen. I was dead wrong about that. A massive win for Labor up there, and in Queensland, in Brisbane. Look at this. I mean, just to give you the picture, before, from the previous election, Labor had these seats here. Look at all this red that has been filled in now after following this election. Bonner was a seat that was highlighted in the YouGov that was sort of a random result, seemingly. Had Labor up. That was spot on, as it turned out. You had, obviously I did predict this, Labor picking up those green seats in Brisbane and South Brisbane, Griffith back from the Greens, and it happened as I said, the Libs fell to third. Obviously Labor got in, but also, it's not really telling the full story. Labor had these massive swings to them. in these seats, even on the primary. A 5 point swing to them. Actually, the Greens dropped into third here in Brisbane. Wow, look at that. And in Griffith as well. It turns out that my sort of assumption. I mean, look, Max Chandler Mather, he went down a bit. It's just that Labor gains a lot. And I saw a lot of sort of Greens shills speaking on Twitter. There's nothing wrong with Greens shills. Well, there is, but I'm only saying that because I'm a Labor shill. I saw a lot of them saying that, you know, the Greens vote held firm. It was just that Liberal votes flipped to Labor. Well, yeah. Australian elections, and this was one of the most encouraging parts about this election for me, is that Australian elections are still a race for the centre. And you can see it by just how badly the coalition was pummeled. That's, I was saying, look, the Greens vote, and I actually do feel rather vindicated about this. I was saying that the Greens vote had completely plateaued, and I was saying this even as every single poll seemed to suggest that they would be increasing their primary vote by a few points. No, they went backwards. Stuck on that 12%, as I said they would be. And you see the ramifications of that. I was saying, Labor's left flank is under control this election. And they were. I'll speak about the collapse of the Greens later, but, I'm obviously feeling very smug about it, I guess, but anyway, I'm just sticking to my prediction. Even a seat like Ryan, it's looking really close. I think as more of the vote is counted, it's harder for Labor to be in the position to overtake the Greens, but they still could do it, and if they do, Labor's won Ryan as well. So the Greens could be on 0 seats by the time this thing is said and done. I was right about Richmond. I actually kind of was thinking it was going to go to the Greens just because I thought, who's voting for Labor in Byron Bay? But it turns out enough people. I was wrong that it was going to be a Labor Nationals contest or a Greens Nationals contest. I'll admit that. This was an odd one because seemingly every party running increased their vote just because for some reason the Libertarian Party had a very inflated vote from last time. And yeah, as we just continue, obviously Dixon. I was really, hoping Ali France would win, or Ailey France, I guess is how you pronounce it, and she did win. I just thought, look, there's no way. Turns out, yes way, there is. She smashed it up there. What a swing. I remember when they were sort of unsure to call it as well, and then eventually it just must have gotten to the point where it's like, nah, come on, it's not going to happen, and she's held that 56% as well. I wasn't expecting Petrie to go to Labor as well, and it did. It's very close, but I guess, enough has been counted to confirm it, and that sort of margin's held all throughout. I'll speak about the rest of Queensland later. Obviously, they picked up Bonner, they picked up Ford as well, which Ford was sort of marginal. I thought it was just they realised too late that it would be a contest that they could be in the running for. Has the ABC called Ford, or is that... This website's very tricky. Has the ABC called Ford yet, or is that just Channel 7 that I was watching? No, okay, they've called Ford. Yeah, what a night for Labor in Queensland, and I've got no idea why. I think it was just... the LNP sucks there, and people remember now after voting them back in, and so they're voting Labor federally. Moving on to New South Wales, I was right about One Nation getting into the 2 in Hunter, but this was a great result for Labor, especially seeing as One Nation nearly won the seat back in 2019. It's back into Labor heartland territory there, so that's great to see. Well, depending on who you're aligned with, that's great to see, I guess. Patterson went to Labor as well. I was wrong about that. In general, I was just, I thought the election would be a lot more narrow than it actually was, so I was taking a lot of these seats that the coalition really did have to pick up to form minority government, or to get close to it anyway. and giving them to the coalition when it really didn't happen. And Labor actually held on in Paterson. I still maintain, however, the fact that this should be a safe national seat. And my only evidence of that is that I've driven from like Williamtown, where the airport is, up into Lyne, and just there's no difference in the regions. Maybe Maitland's sort of keeping it Labor, but there's a seat like Cowper, which I guess we could talk about now. A seat like Cowper's got both Port Macquarie and Coffs Harbour in it. That's a national seat. Now, on the topic of Cowper, I actually think I had them. I think I had them as independent. I'm gonna have to check my video real quick. I think I gave it to the independents, yeah, because I was convinced by Jeremy Buckingham, of all people, that Kaz Heiss would be picking up the seat. As it turns out, that didn't happen. Let's see here. Yeah, I had Kaz Heiss picking up Cowper. And I actually had, we'll talk about Alex Dyson and Wannon as well. I was really confident it was going to happen just because everyone else seemed to be, but really I think my instincts, which were that, I don't think the independents are actually going to pick up many seats this time around. I think they were right. I think they were correct. I think Cowper's been called. Let's just see here. Yeah. It actually swung towards the Nationals. It's pretty amazing. I guess those radio ads I heard just didn't cut it. Now, Callear I was wrong about. I think I probably just picked the wrong national seat to go to the independents. I imagine it's still tricky in Callear because it depends how the preferences are allocated, but if it roughly stays like this, I imagine Kate Hook's preferences will go to Andrew G, and he'll get in off of that, and obviously off the Labor Party and the Greens and all that. Shooters Fishers is running, huh? I didn't know that. I didn't really know that they were still... I know they were running in the Senate, but I didn't realise they were actually still trying to make a push for those sort of Nationals seats. So yeah, Andrew G looks like he's picked up Callear. I was wrong about that. Who liked Andrew G? I guess people in Lithgow. I was pretty right about all of Sydney. I think the only one that I really mucked up was Banks. I thought 2022 was Labor's chance, and there I guess I was wrong. They managed to pick it up. One thing that did actually surprise me on the night was just the swing towards Labor in Bennelong. And they're nearly holding it on a 10-point margin. That's massive. Because that was one of those seats that I thought, oh, maybe they might not pick that up in the end. Nah, they romped it in there. I think Bradfield is still too close to call. Currently the Teal is ahead there, but I mean, I don't know. There's a decent amount in. I feel like that'll probably just hold, right? Not sure. Look, I called it. I called Hughes. And I was saying that Labor would win Hughes even without this massive landslide. But let me just see what the margin was on, because I was expecting it to be ultra marginal, but they're holding it by 2 points. I don't know, man. I saw the demographic shift. I saw the redistribution. I thought, it's one of those ones that could happen. I'm very pissed off at myself that I didn't put money on it, but I got too scared in the end, and I thought, it could very easily not happen. But I was right about Hughes. I actually don't remember. Oh yeah, it was the Redbridge MRP that sort of put that notion in my head that Labor could pick up Hughes, and it turned out to be quite accurate. Yeah, I remember seeing Lindsay, the early results for Lindsay coming in, and thinking, wow, that's really good for Labor, actually. Yeah, it ended up being quite close, actually. Old Penrith area. Now, Gilmore, I was wrong about. Gilmore was quite the shock as well. I remember seeing Gilmore coming in and thinking, wow, that looks great as well. It's amazing how scared I am of... I'm not scared, but I guess I'm just... there's a block in my brain from thinking, wow, Labor's doing well, just because they never win elections. At least not in my lifetime, especially. But yeah, they were smashing it, and I remember seeing them doing well early in the night and thinking, I feel like this is just early days here, but they really held the line the entire night, and that's a decent swing as well in Gilmore. Um, just looking at what else we have here in terms of the actual results. I want to talk about the Greens and the Independents in Melbourne. I actually talk about in Tasmania. They had Peter George running, obviously, in Franklin. Now, jeez. Now, it's looking like Julie Collins is going to hold on. Now, these are just uh, estimated by the ABC here, by Anthony Green's computer program. Look, the preferences might not even flow to Peter George that high when they end up counting it. I'm assuming on Monday, but I'm not sure. I mean, look, we're going to find out in a few hours anyway. Could be wrong about that. I know that the Liberals preferenced, they on their how to votes, they recommended to preference uh, Julie Collins over Peter George, and I think that's what will save her in the end. But look, it's a strong performance, and I wasn't. Look, I think it'll probably go with Labor, so I think I was probably right about that. But I don't know. I didn't assume the issue of salmon farming would be that big of an issue, and I actually don't think. I think it was sort of localized to Franklin because you saw these huge swings to Labor in the other seats. Um, Once again, I shouldn't have drunk the Teal Kool-Aid as everyone else was drinking. I was really not thinking that Wannon was going to do anything. And I think the only thing that changed my mind about it was that random YouGov poll that had him winning by 7 points. What an outlier! I should I should be more trusting of my own, not model, but I don't know, my own instincts, because I think if I had left Cowper and with the Nationals and won with the Liberals, it would have been a better prediction overall. So yeah, one and didn't do anything. I think it actually ended up swinging towards Dan uh, Tahan. I don't know how you pronounce his last name. I don't really care. He might be the leader of the Federal Liberal Party. That might be exciting. I'm hoping for Angus Taylor, obviously, but look, if it's sort of an all-out brawl between Hasty and Taylor, then Dan could probably throw his hat in the ring as the sort of compromise candidate there. He did quite well. From what I heard, sort of in the days leading up to the election, a lot of the Climate 200 money was cut off from these sort of marginal seats that were going for, like, I guess Clare and Wannon, and they were sort of refocused at sandbagging their own seats, which is extremely interesting, actually, that they felt the need to, and I think honestly it was a good call, because although they have held all of their seats that they picked up, both Goldstein and Kooyong are looking extremely close now. Last I checked, look, I think Monique Ryan will probably hold on in Kooyong, because I mean she's on the same. She's look. It looks on paper like she's done a lot better, but I think honestly a lot of her increase on the primary is just Labor and Greens votes just going for her number one instead. I don't think a lot of it's been counted. There's been no swing towards the Liberals. As I said, both were shocking candidates, and I think that's really been shown here in this result. I think she might hold on. Now, Goldstein is looking extremely marginal. Zoe Daniel leads by 95 votes. They got to update it, man. 6 hours ago. I guess it's pretty late. Everyone's asleep except me. Yeah, it's looking like Tim Wilson might pick the seat back up, which would really look. You can't have everything in life. I had a great night on Saturday. Max Chandler Mather down in Griffith. Michael Sukker down in Deakin. It's looking like Adam Bant might lose his own seat in Melbourne, but we'll get to that in a minute. And obviously Peter Dutton losing his seat. Look, Tim Wilson is a blow, but I think it's a worthy trade-off. We'll have to see what happens though in Goldstein. I've heard maybe it was the Jewish vote that swung to the Liberals, but I'm not really comfortable in insinuating that I don't know enough about the situation. Uh, just a bit more on Melbourne. Obviously, I was right about got Chisholm. Chisholm's actually now pretty strong for the Labor Party. It's a 5 point margin. It's sort of going back to how it was under. Well, I don't actually remember how it was under Anna Burke, but at least uh, essentially what they won it by uh, at the last election, and that's even with Box Hill being redistributed out to Menzies. Bruce was a pretty astonishing result because although I did predict it for Labor, I thought well, I didn't actually. I thought it was going to be pretty good for Labor, but it was looking. It was on what a 3% margin, and it was looking like that was one of the seats that the coalition was just going to pick up regardless. Like your McEwens, and obviously that hasn't happened. Julian Hill's up 15 points on the TPP. I did say that Julian Hill was popular nationwide, but I wasn't sure if he was a good local member. Turns out he's a very popular local member. Yeah, Liberals really had a bad candidate there as well. But look, I really think they went down by 9 points and Labor went up by 6 points, so they didn't just benefit from all of that anti Zahid vote. Anyway, the seat of McNamara was resolved rather quickly. What I thought was going to happen actually did end up eventuating, and that was that Josh Burns would be popular with the Jewish voters in the area, and his primary would just increase regardless. And he had quite a large victory. And I knew it because I was at the St Kilda Festival and nobody booed him. That's when I knew he had held on. Wills is extremely interesting to me because sort of back and forth for a while, but it does look like Peter Cahlill's going to hold on, even though a lot of the Labor voting areas was redistributed. Also, watching back the video, I realised I hadn't pronounced redistributed correctly. I think I pronounced it as redistributed the entire video, which was just personally annoying to me, but anyway. Look, I think he'll probably hold on to the seat. It's interesting to see Socialist Alliance do so well. It does sort of get tricky for Labor because there is a lot of left-wing minor parties running, but it seems as though he might just hold on. And now there's a lot, enough of the votes been in, and we're getting into the the pre-poll vote, which much like how the pre-poll favours the Liberals over Labor, it favours Labor over the Greens because of Liberal preferences. So look, I think Wills will probably be a hold for Labor, which means that what I said about Melbourne not doing particularly well for the Greens actually rang true, to the point that Adam Bandt might lose his own seat, which would be 5 for 5 for me if he does. They're currently behind. His margin's been going down each update. Haven't had an update in 2 hours now. Only postal votes have been added in, not really the rest of the pre-poll. And obviously there's a high Liberal vote in the postal votes because there's a lot of elderly voters that could be sort of skewed towards Labor. But just looking on the first preference votes, I think Labor will get over the line just barely, just by the barest degree, the slightest of margins, just off the skin of their teeth. Which is really, that's an astonishing result. Now, I know the seat was reduced to like a Greens, here it's got 6.5% because it lost Fitzroy to Cooper, and it sort of incorporated all of that Labor voting area in, your Prahran's and that. But I wasn't expecting this. Damn, I was not expecting this at all. The Greens have a real shot to be on 0 seats by the end of this. I don't know what to say. Total destruction of the Greens political party. Albo's done it. Nah, look. Anyway, I think that's probably about it. I think my prediction was good, just in the sense that, look, I was obviously following the polls. I probably relied on them too much, but I did have the expectation that they would be accurate because they were 3 years ago, and they have been at the state level as well. Obviously, it was a big error this time around. It'll be interesting to see what happens to the methodology, how it changes, but I mean, that's nerd shit. Who gives a fuck about that, right? I was right in the sense that I was predicting an increased majority. Um, I guess that's more than what most were doing. I don't know. I'm very pleased with the results, regardless of what happens. I just wanted to take a look at the current map. Um, there's some seats in doubt that I just wanted to cover. Obviously, look, Labor's won. That much is clear. They could lose all of these seats in doubt and it wouldn't matter. They'd have a huge majority, but I actually don't think that's the case. Now, I can't really say for certain. We'll just start up here in Brisbane. Longman is looking quite close. I think we'll just go to this. We'll go to live results, seats in doubt, and this might be just better to go off of. No, I hate when they do that. They make it a tab grouping. We'll just close that because that's my prediction. Bean was looking pretty bad on the night. It was looking like the Independent was going to pick that up, and I mean, just looking at the first preference votes, they've counted a lot of them, and I know the Liberals preference they recommended to preference. I think they recommended to preference the Independent over the Labor member there, and obviously I think the Greens would flow to the Independent more than they would to Labor as well. That might not be true at all, but in that case, I think it would have been hard. I realised I was focusing on Longman, but I guess we'll just go in order of the webpage. I thought it would have been hard for Labor to make up the ground. It's important to acknowledge that this is just an estimate by the ABC, and in the end, there may not even be that high of a preference flow to the Independent here in Bean. Labor's taken over in the lead after being behind for a bit there. I'm not really sure what happens here. It's looking like Labor may be able to get in. What else do we have here? We got Bendigo. Bendigo was an extremely close result. I know the Nationals were pushing hard for it after the redistribution, and I knew that they were going to give Lisa Chester's a scare, but this is pretty drastic. Now, the preferences aren't bad for Labor. I don't really know why it's 46 to 43. I'm not really sure what's going on there. I think Lisa Chester's will probably hold on. I think it'll be really close. Look, I can't say for sure. We're going to find out tomorrow. They're going to actually start tallying a lot of these preferences. Caldwell is just a completely fucked up contest. There are 3 independent candidates running. They've amassed up to 40% of the vote, which is just insane. Yeah, just a terrible contest here. It's going to be extremely complicated. In theory, all 3 of the independents, their voters could preference each other, in which case, I suppose they'd make the 2. I don't know if the Liberal Party recommended preferencing any of the independents. If they didn't, it would, obviously Pauline Hanson. I don't really know what the right-wing miners do. I actually don't know much about the independents. I think they're sort of... Nah, I don't know. I really don't know. I don't know any of their policies. I think it is sort of the Daily thing of like, Labor has ignored this community or whatever, without going into what that means or what they're going to what they're going to do differently about it. I think what will actually end up happening is that there won't be much preference discipline between each of the 3 independents just because there's too much. Look, if I got a ballot in front of me that had 3 separate independents on there, I just think, fuck it, and I just order it in the number of how they appeared. I probably wouldn't actually, I'd probably research their platforms, but look, obviously I don't have much patience for independence. I think that much has been evidenced by these 2 videos. I think, I don't know, look, we'll have to see, but the fact that there are 3 separate independents might benefit Labor. Look, I really don't know. My brain can't even begin to add up those numbers in my head. It's too late. Flinders is interesting. I saw Kevin Bonham saying earlier that he's moved it to his probable Liberal retain column. Ben Smith did quite well. I was wrong about that, actually. I thought that it would just be a Labor-Liberal contest. I suppose it still could be. but I'd imagine that those Greens preferences will probably split to him. I'm not sure actually. I think that they typically go to the Teal candidates, which is a bit silly because the only policy the Teals have in common is that they are rather progressive on climate. That's it. Otherwise, they're liberals, and a lot of them were just liberals that didn't make pre-selection. But anyway, that's beside the point. I actually saw Zoe Mackenzie on Sky News on Friday. I'm a big fan of watching Sky News. Actually, unironically, I do enjoy it quite a lot. Obviously, they don't reflect my political leanings in the slightest, but you've got to have a laugh sometimes. I actually thought, the way she spoke was good, impressive to me. I kind of like her. She's my favourite Liberal. No, not really, but why don't they run her as leader? Nah, who knows? I actually don't know much about her. I've also got to stop saying the word. Fremantle's interesting because obviously you have Kate. I didn't even touch upon this in my prediction video. You got Kate Hewlett running. She ran for the statewide seat of Fremantle at the state election. She lost that very quickly. Cleared up all of her Section 44s that were going on there so that she could run federally. I sort of see her as a bit of an opportunist for that. She lost in the state election and then immediately turned around and ran federally. She's doing well though. Are these... Okay, the AEC is taking in preferences. There's a decent amount in. There's enough in to call it. Well, I guess not when it's this marginal, but yeah, 196 votes. I don't know how much more of the pre-poll is going to come in. In this case, the pre-poll will favour Labor just because her campaign is pretty rushed in the end there, and she only started to gain traction in the last few weeks. I do know that the Liberals recommended that they preference their voters. God, it's getting late. Their voters preference her over Labor. She could pick up the seat, I guess. We'll have to see. That's in Fremantle here. Although, sort of the thing is, she did get really close at the state election. I'm just going to pull up those results. But the thing about Fremantle on the statewide level is that it's a lot closer. It's a lot more condensed. It really is just on the suburb of Fremantle, whereas federally it incorporates a lot of working class suburbs. Let's just see here, Fremantle WA election. Extremely close in the end. I actually think ABC called it for, they do this sometimes. They called it for the independent and then retracted it, and then obviously Labor ended up winning very marginally in the end there. We'll have to see what happens there. We've got gotta wait for the page to load here. Yeah, Melbourne, I've already spoken about this. Obviously I'm wish casting Labor to win just because, come on, it'd be funny. But look, I was thinking this on the night, even when Bant was sort of ahead, and even in this previous day where he has been ahead and he's only recently dropped back, that enough of, I don't know, Cooter's votes will go to Labor, I guess. I don't know. It'll be extremely close though. Monash is another fucked up contest. I was kind of right in thinking that Russell Broadbent wouldn't actually do that well. Depending on how preference flows go, one of the independents can get into the two, I guess, but I actually feel like this result's pretty accurate to what will actually end up happening. Could be wrong about that. We're going to find out very soon anyway. Yeah, Ryan I've spoken about as well. It's looking like Elizabeth Watson-Brown will hold on. Labor is really close to overtaking her, in which case they'll pick up the seat. Kooyong I've spoken about. Bradfield, yeah, it's another one of those close ones. I've already spoken about that. Menzies, it's looking close. I'm not quite sure. Bullwinkle I've spoken about. I've said that Mia Davies running has really thrown a spanner into the works. I imagine that this lead would probably just hold, but look, I'm really not sure. Wills, I think Labor will hold on to. I actually was going to mention, I wonder how much Julian Assange endorsing Labor helped out the party in this seat. Obviously,
Brunswick falls within the boundaries of Wills. Strong Greens area, I said it wouldn't be enough for them to pick up the seat. It's looking like I was right about that. Maybe Assange's endorsement flipped a couple votes around. I did see a lot of replies to, when that was announced by certain news stations where they were saying, wow, how selfish of Assange. It's like, mate, what have you done? What have you done for free speech and freedom of information and journalism? I'm sure you haven't done more than Assange has. I'm sure you're not as accomplished or have suffered enough or have made a greater contribution than he has. So yeah, obviously a lot of the cookers were upset about that. Spoken about Franklin, spoken about Goldstein. Longman, Labor's been ahead for a while there. They haven't updated it in a while though, but they were on this number even on election night. Can't help but think it'll go back to the Libs. It just seems too good to be true. I mean, look at Queensland. Come on. That's astounding. Look, it could happen, and I'm not quite sure. We're going to run into issues when they get into sort of the preferences, because you've got One Nation, Trumpet, and Family First. Those are all obviously going to preference the Liberals quite heavily. But yeah, look, who knows? I just wanted to touch briefly upon, and once again, just looking at the primary vote. One Nation was extremely overestimated. I saw them getting up to 10 points in some of these polls, and that just didn't eventuate at all. It's kind of like how back in 2022 they were saying that Clive Palmer's vote was severely underestimated, and then it wasn't. And just briefly speaking on Clive Palmer, that man has just lost, millions of dollars just down the hatch, gone into picking up not a single seat. I don't even think they're going to make the deposit back on a single lower house seat. But I did think it was very funny how he was just vibing out on the Channel 7 coverage of the election. And no one was like, hey Clive, you spent a lot of money on this, how do you feel? He was just sort of there hanging out. You gotta respect it. I respect it. One Nation, they did increase their vote a little bit. Not as much as people were saying. And a lot of those votes were just disaffected Liberals. The Greens have gone backwards. They're actually under 12% now. I didn't know that. In general, I think I did pretty good. I'm surprised that I managed to get some interest in the video. Usually I just upload shittily recorded footage of songs from gigs that I attend, so we're branching out. This is now a variety channel. No, not really. Don't expect anything from me. Or maybe do. I don't know. That sounded really mean-spirited. It wasn't meant in that way at all. That's about it. Huge win for Labour. That's it.